What about the one in this, your second one, is it Spotsylvania, your second one?
Spotsylvania County
Yeah.
granted the Y 20 acres, and there was a fundraising effort for the...
So that was, the fundraiser came first, and then fundraising, then you built, correct?
Correct.
Okay, after the fundraising.
Correct.
Were you contacted by anyone, or you guys decided, were you contacted by anyone in the county that, hey, was there something, anyone from the county that came to you and said, hey, we really want the YMCA here? Was there an individual, or was it something, a decision?
Probably right after we embarked on the second YMCA in Spotsylvania, we've been fielding calls all over the region, whether it be up in North Stafford, whether it be in King George, whether it be in Spotsylvania, in Caroline County. We were fielding calls probably on a monthly basis in each one of these localities, even Culpeper, Orange, Warrington, for people interested in trying to establish a YMCA in their locality. So many people from Caroline called during the course of those years, yes.
Now, did you guys do, like when you opened the one, for example, in King George, or the one in, Spotsylvania, did you guys do surveys about, for example, memberships and stuff like that? Do you guys send out surveys, or before you decide you're going to build, do you guys do surveys? Hey, look, we've got this many surveys out there. We have 1,000 people that definitely say they want a YMCA.
We looked at the demographics in a rooftop study and looked at potential penetration in the market to establish, to make a case for that YMCA. And also, we again, looking at the locality, for instance, in King George, knowing that we felt very confident that a YMCA would be very successful, yes. So we internally did our own assessment.
Now, do you have, when you say the demographics, because that brings up an interesting, because like sometimes in businesses, when you want them to get them to Caroline County, they and you're right about rooftops, they say, we're just not coming because you don't have the rooftops. Is there a number that you guys, look at for rooftops as far as, because sometimes we struggle getting businesses, I'm sure, struggle to get businesses in. And is there a number that you guys look for? Or?
We try to feel confident that we could have between 1,000 and 1,500 billing units in that area in order for that facility to be financially viable.
So basically, is that memberships?
Correct. A unit could be a family of 5, or it could be a single adult.
Okay, so either family membership.
And in King George, we hit our number very quickly, and we felt like the performance of Caroline could mirror that of King George, in that it was a consistent.
So you have the 1,000 to 1,500 units or memberships in King George?
Yes. We actually were north of that. We're almost at 2,000.
Right. And how are you doing in, because I know you have more competition probably in Spotsylvania, American Family Fitness and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Do you have, how are the units there?
Rosner's about 2,000 as well.
Oh, really? In Spotsylvania? Oh, great. That's great. I guess the next question is the capital campaign. It's only mentioned once in I think it's paragraph 13 of the grant agreement. And when the grant agreement between the county and the YMCA, there's a capital campaign. Are you aware of that capital campaign, the original capital campaign when you guys came? Are you aware of any sort of capital campaign that would fundraise?
Oh, absolutely.
For the YMCA?
I know there was going to be an effort, and certainly the YMCA was going to assist with that effort, as we have.
Okay. Were you aware that there was a promise made that no taxpayer money would be used to fund the YMCA?
I know that was the intention, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, as far as the YMCA, you guys operate, I would imagine, like there's a George Washington Regional Commission. You guys have a commission.
We have a regional board of directors. And
is it one from each county, or one? Is that how it works? Is there like so many people from each county or jurisdiction? Like, for example, King George, you have a representative from King George, a representative from Spotsylvania, a representative from Fredericksburg. Is that how it works?
Correct. Well, yes.
Now, so that's the Rappahannock YMCA board, correct?
We have a regional board of directors.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, are you guys in charge of capital fundraising at all? Does that regional board of directors do capital fundraising?
At various times they do.
So are they currently doing capital fundraising for the YMCA in Caroline?
No.
So there is no, you guys are not raising capital for the YMCA in Caroline County?
No, I'm assisting with the capital campaign effort. That is the obligation of the YMCA at this time. But this is not a Rappahannock area YMCA capital campaign, no.
Okay. Now, do we have, once the Caroline County YMCA opens up, there will be a Caroline Advisory Board, is that correct?
Yes, a Board of Management Advisory Board, yes.
Do advisory boards, like say for example in the other jurisdictions, so our advisory board will not be around until it actually opens up, physically opens up, correct?
They're being assembled as we speak. I would say in the next 60 to 90 days, this advisory board will be in place.
Oh, okay, that brings up a point. Who or what, I mean, because we've granted $5 million in this grant agreement, who makes up that, who picks that committee? Is that going to be you guys that pick that committee? Is that the Board of Supervisors that picks that committee? Who generally picks, in King George and other counties, who generally picks that committee?
Well, certainly we would encourage and welcome any suggestions that you have and leaders in the community. There have been some people that have expressed some interest. There was a committee that was meeting at the Visitor Center for people supporting the YMCA that have alluded to the fact that they'd like to serve on that board. But if you have anybody that you would like to recommend, we would welcome it.
I guess, okay, and I mean, so there's no set standard in, like, for example, in Fredericksburg or Stafford, there's no set standard on who makes up the local committee? It's the Board of Supervisors, say, for example, a town council, or in Fredericksburg or Stafford doesn't pick them, it changes per jurisdiction, is that what you're saying?
Well, what we've done in the past is the board, we have, the board of directors has its own nomination committee, and they cultivate new board members in the various areas. So at the regional level, we have maybe had several people on the regional board, or the original Massett board, that lived in Spotsylvania. When we opened up the Spotsylvania branch, several of those individuals went over and cultivated a group of leaders in Spotsylvania to form that board. We did the same thing in King George.
Now, the local boards, are they in charge of in any way capital fundraising? Like, for example, the King George, you said you had to finance $1.3, $1.5 million, even though they granted you the 4.5. Does the local King George YMCA board, do they do capital campaign?
They can, yes.
They can. Okay, so they can as well. But yeah, the question is, do they? Yeah. Do they in King George?
Well, since we had the building erected, we haven't embarked on another capital project. So the original seed money was given by the county, right, King George, and then we did an operational campaign to generate some money for operations in King George. We went ahead and borrowed the balance of that money to complete the project. So the campaign that we embarked on in King George was for operational dollars.
Okay. So the other $1.3 million that you guys financed, or whatever, to finish off as far as the building, how is that being paid? Yeah, because you said it was a total of $6 million. The county granted you, King George County granted you 4.5. That other capital money, how is that
generated through operations?
You're paying it off through operations.
Correct.
Okay. Over, is it 20 years, 30 years?
It's a 20-year note, yeah.
It's a 20-year note. Okay. I guess the next question, if you would, maybe this. So right now, I've got two committees that deal with the YMCA. I've got the YMCA, the Rappahannock YMCA board, correct? And then I've got a local that will open in Caroline. And they both can do fundraising?
Absolutely. If at a branch, for instance, if there's going to be an expansion at that branch to possibly build racquetball courts or whatever they feel is necessary, that board will take on the responsibility to conduct a campaign.
But right now, the only one that's existing for Caroline County is your board that you serve on, and it has not, is that what you're saying, has not been doing much capital?
Oh, they're always in a fundraising mode. We have a number of projects internally, but it's not specific to Caroline, no. Okay. The agreement, Mr. Black, in the beginning was that I would lend my services to help with the effort locally to raise money, and I have done that, and I will continue to do that.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I guess the next question is for Mr. Akers. When this thing was passed, we heard numerous times as a county, not one penny of taxpayer money would be used. And there would be a capital campaign. It's mentioned several times throughout these minutes, the capital campaign. Who makes up that original capital campaign committee?
First of all, let me say, Mr. Black, that it has been, and you're absolutely correct. I did say that it
Wait a
was
second, Mr. Akers. And I understand you have a valid question for Mr. Akers, and he's probably got a valid answer. But let's take advantage of Mr. Riley first,
Okay.
and then we'll come back.
All right. I guess I'm just looking through the notes here.
Take advantage of Mr. Riley's
right.
presence.
I
not
appreciate
take
that,
advantage of
Mr.
Mr.
Thomas.
Riley.
I know you meant well.
Unless you got some money in your pocket, we can take advantage of
I
it.
left it in my truck.
It's outside?
Yes, and it is unlocked.
Scott, would you take care of that, please? Okay. Mr. Riley, I'm sure you understand. We just want to have some questions for you, like
absolutely.
you're saying,
These are-
and then we'll have our internal discussion.
Absolutely.
And you can have a seat.
Okay. I guess the only thing I saw in the minutes from the December 7, 2010 minutes, I saw a quote from you, and you had said, and I agree with Mr. Atwell and Ms. Anderson in the sense that the county granted you guys $5 million. And don't get me wrong, I mean, you may hear that, you know, Mr. Black or so-and-so is against a YMCA. That's not it at all, okay? We are on the hook for $5 million, and, you know, anytime that we spend money, we have to be, you know, we have to be transparent, open. And the only thing that I saw that I would like to hear from you is just like that committee tonight. Any money that they can raise for us is money that technically taxpayers don't have to pay.
Absolutely.
And so that's an important thing to know. But in the December 7th, 2010 minutes, you had stated, and it's in the minutes, you were committed to do, okay, whatever it takes to make this work.
Absolutely.
Okay. I guess the concern that I have is the fact that I want the YMCA, and I want to go, and I want it to happen on the original promise by Mr. Akers that not a penny of taxpayer money is going to be used. So I guess the question to you is, can we count on you and the YMCA, which by the way is going to be a great thing for the county, no question about that, can we count on you to alleviate the taxpayer burden, because we've got a lot of other projects and so forth that we need to pay for, can we count on you to raise a significant portion of that money to offset the $5 million?
I have never wavered from my commitment to the county. I will be there and continue to raise money. I cannot commit my board. That was never part of the original agreement.
Absolutely,
No,
you're right.
But yes, to answer your question, yes, absolutely. And I think the record shows that I've made several calls up to date, and I will continue to do so.
Yes, I appreciate that. The record also, I mean, right now the record is from the spreadsheet that we received last night from the Board of Supervisors is that we see $299,000 that's been raised for the YMCA. We owe $5 million.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a significant
No question.
gap there.
This is
so $300,000, and we approved this in, 2011. So, and the first $175,000, I believe, was used for design and engineering. So we've got a long ways to go to reach that $5 million.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate you coming, I really do, and I don't want to feel like I'm,
Oh, no, I don't think that at all.
I just, we have questions that we want addressed, and anything that you can do, any money that you, at this point, because in the last board meeting, we had to approve $60,000 in taxpayer money, pay interest only. I mean, and so that's kind of rough. The taxpayers have a hard time saying, we didn't even pay for a nail. We didn't pay for a cinder block.
Right.
So that's kind of a hard thing. So I appreciate anything that you can do to help us would be very much appreciated. So that's it from Mr. Riley, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Seeley?
Mr. Riley, good evening.
How you doing, Mr. Seeley?
I am good. I have the construction documents because I have some questions. And at our last board meeting, I asked about change orders and the construction kinds of stuff. So what I actually had delivered to me, and I didn't realize this existed, were the construction documents you provide to the county monthly to be paid on. So my questions are surrounding sort of these documents and where they're at and what we kind of need to get them straightened out. I guess just my first question is kind of where do we stand on the YMCA construction?
Okay. We should be in the facility, we anticipate and we hope that we'll be in by late fall.
Okay. I mean, December, January?
I would say between, and again, this is my best guess, but it looks like we'll be in between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Okay.
But we certainly anticipate and expect to be in this facility in 2013.
December 21st is winter.
Yes.
Okay, so anything December 20th is late fall still.
There you go. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I take it that you look at these
I was
construction...
a project manager, I understand.
I take it you look at these construction documents every month?
Absolutely.
So I mean, I know you've signed them, so everybody's level of understanding sometimes is a little different on these. The first thing that I looked for was the detail on the change orders. And the interesting thing about the change orders, and I started with the last one figuring that the most complete list of change orders would be here. And I guess my confusion started then because the general change orders are listed and they go 1, 2, 5, 6R, 7, 8, 9, 10, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. But there's no description of what any of those are, and I can't find them in the construction documents that you send to us. So I guess my first sort of concern is, can we see the detail of the change orders?
Well, I will say this. I will be glad to provide all the documentation in accordance with the agreement. I can't say anything outside of that. But any documentation in accordance with the agreement, you'll get. I promise you that.
Well, I'm hoping this is in accord because it does help track the cost, because one of the other sort of anomalies in this is the March 4th billing document, which was number 12. That came to us, and I don't know what the date was that it actually got here, but the interesting thing is that when you look at the billing and the actual line items that are provided by the architect in the breakdown of the cost and the change orders, there are only 8 listed in the March document. And again, the numbers run the same. They're 1, 2, 5, 7, and 8. But then I get to the April document, and we have the same sort of order, but they go all the way through 22. So everything from one month to the next is completely missing, and there's no description of the billing for the change order. And the other thing I was looking for was the architect's signature on the change order, and I can't find them.
No, the architect stated prior to the beginning of the project that for reasons that I can't disclose, that he's not signing the draw requisitions for any project, not just this one.
Right.
So what we did was we secured a third-party inspector to come down and to ensure that the draw requisition was in line with the progress of the project. So we weren't getting ahead of the payments. So we did secure the services of an individual to ensure that we were properly funding the project and not getting ahead of the payments.
I understand that, but I'm talking about the change order. The architect has the plans and all the details of the plans. So any change order to a plans should go to the architect. Or even, I'll even give you your third party, but none of those descriptions exist in the document.
If it pertains to the building, it normally would go to the architect. If it pertains to the site, we would go with our civil engineer.
Because I do see bills from the guy who is the architect, based on everything that I read. His name is...
John Berger.
Yeah, I think
Those
that's
are for submittals.
But, and I understand because I've talked to some folks about when I was on the school board, the architect signed every draw. I understand that any PE can sign those. But we don't have any description of any of the change orders. And I'm curious how there's so many gaps in them, because every construction project when I was on the school board, they were literally in order with a description and a cost. And I don't know what's happened to like 3 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Mr. Riley, and I know Mr. Seeley's going through it, you just said you would get us all the documentation?
As long as we're in total compliance with the agreement, I will be glad to do whatever to be in accordance. The only thing I would like to add to that, and I don't want to get too far off on it, if I'm sure you've done your due diligence and you've looked at the draw requisitions, the total amount of the change orders to date is $77,000. Standard in the industry is usually 3 to 5%. We're at 2%. So change orders are not a factor in this in terms of this being overrun, cost overruns with the budget. Right now, we're at less than 2% to budget. And we anticipate now that we're going vertical with the building and we're familiar with this footprint, we shouldn't have too many change orders. And again, I'm not going to overcommit and underdeliver, but I promise you this, at the end of the day, change orders won't be a factor.
Well, I guess I'm concerned because there's all these missing, and I don't want to see them drop at the end of the project and go, oh, by the way, these are the additional change orders that were done that didn't get accounted for until the end of the project.
They may have been submitted. We evaluated them with our civil engineer, and they became a non-factor, and that's why they went by the wayside. There's not going to be these 6 through 18 number of change orders at the end of the project. That won't happen.
Maybe if it's possible, you could just get us a list of the change orders and have those forwarded. You could forward those to Mr. Culley, and Mr. Culley will distribute them to the board.
And I just don't want there to be any ambiguity at the end. I'm just looking at what I've got, and I'm just describing it to you so that you later on understand what I'm looking at, because there's just, typically in the construction projects I was involved in, these ran sequential, and you didn't skip one, you didn't leave any out. Mm-hmm. And I
understand.
And I guess I was really concerned when we went from number 12 to number 15. I don't know what happened to 13 and 14 in between 2 months, because according to the contract, the bills only come once a month, because I went and looked to make sure there wasn't some interim billing, but it plainly spells out the bills are once a month, and there was one for 3/4 and then 4/12/13, yet the numbers are out of sequence, and all those change orders in between are missing.
So again, is your concern that at the end all these missing change orders are going to come and be thrown into the equation, and because that's not going to happen?
I don't know. All I'm pointing out are the anomalies in what we have. Right. Because I can't speculate what all that means. I'm just saying typically what I've been exposed to in building projects, school projects that were big, those change orders came in succession, and there was never any missing. I mean, if the architect didn't approve them, that number was used on the next change order. It didn't get skipped. It was just left for next because it didn't get approved, which I guess was, and I'm doing sort of the geometry, if obtuse angles, if this one's this degree, the opposite angle of the same circumference has to be the same angle, and I'm doing the geometry here.
I understand.
Mr. Riley, again, I mean, we'll move on to the next subject, but you're going to get us all the change orders.
Let me just I just want to make sure that everything that I agree to do is, I just got to make sure it's in accordance with the agreement. We are going to be in total compliance with the agreement. I can assure you that.
Okay. Which agreement?
The grant agreement.
We'll talk about that in a second. One, I guess a couple of things in the architect's breakdown of schedule, which is what I'm looking at. That's what you guys send us every month to be paid on. Line item 27 is lockers and benches. My understanding is the county, according to the agreement, didn't buy any equipment. And I kind of consider lockers and benches equipment because they get replaced, they get beat up. That is equipment that the Y should buy, not necessarily the county.
It's never been considered equipment in any of our projects. Equipment, we would feel, is computers, copiers, fitness equipment. That's what we...
Balls.
Sorry?
Balls. When you say it, because then line item 23 is athletic equipment, and there's a line item for $27,120 in the county budget for that.
And that is erroneous. There is not going to be one dime spent on equipment. Let me be clear on that. There will not be one dime spent on equipment because that's not part of the agreement. In the agreement, we're not allowed to spend any money on equipment. Again, we're going to be in total compliance.
I guess we'll just we'll just differ on lockers and benches, because I see that as
I
in the
understand.
same venue, because we've had to replace lockers in school, just like you have to replace desks. You know, whole banks come out, whole banks go in. The other sort of line that has me a little disturbed is the paving line item. Have you looked at that?
I have.
Because we've spent $111,000 of the $139,000 that was allotted.
Right.
And I can't believe that we're not going to spend equal or more to do the final paving than we spent on the first coat.
I know the base coat's down and we have the top coat. The general contractor has assured me there's enough money in each line item to finish that respective trade. So that's, it may appear that we're out in front on that payment, but we've had that discussion and they have assured me that there will be enough money.
How about the earthworks? Because I see that we've spent 98% of that budget, and there are some mountains out next to that building of dirt.
When you say the mountains, from the earth that was there when we got there, from the site, dumping site of Newland Companies?
There are 3 huge piles of dirt.
Right.
I mean,
But those
gargantuan.
Those are like 100, 200 yards to the left as you pull into the Y. I was there Saturday.
Right.
So as you pull into the Y, the building itself is on the right-hand side, and those 3 mountains are on the left, 100, 150 yards away.
I would have to defer on that, as I'm not privy to, I'd have to check the boundary survey and to ensure that that's our property and speak with Mr. Nunley, with our civil engineer.
I was just trying to give you an idea. It
Yeah.
may be that that belongs to the Newland property, and that's their issue. Ms. Akers, you're aware?
Yes.
That's, okay.
Christopher dumping ground, if you will, is Muellen's, has nothing to do with the water. The only mountain that I know you're speaking about is the mountain that's behind the Y. That was, as you recall, Mr. Raleigh, that was moved and seeded so that it could stay in place, because there was not enough money to move that mound of dirt, that mountain of dirt. And so that is going to stay in place.
Yeah, that's been stabilized, and
That's been
that's my
stabilized.
knowledge.
Absolutely.
It's been approved by Mr. Nunley, and we're in accordance with the needs and satisfaction of that.
And I guess my next comment is on the actual grant agreement. And I'm going to read you paragraph 2. The county will donate to the YMCA by grant sufficient. The county will donate to the YMCA by grant sufficient funds for the design, construction of the facility in the amount not to exceed $5 million. Here's my part of concern. Less amounts received by the YMCA from other sources as the result of any capital campaign fund conducted to raise funds for the project. Let me just say that my interpretation of this is that any capital campaign funds that were raised that were given to the county should go to the principal and not to interest payments that we're currently making, or to be applied to those interest payments. That money should be deducted from the $5 million and put in an account to make a principal payment when we roll this over into a loan. So any monies that were granted to the YMCA, and I'll go to the 299, should be in a principal account based on your agreement for the YMCA for the principal amount for construction later, and not for anything else. And that includes the design funds.
Okay. But let me be clear, this capital campaign is not the sole responsibility of the YMCA. We never took that on. I agreed from the very beginning that I would assist in the efforts to raise money, and I promise you I will continue to do so.
And I'm going to go back to paragraph 13. In addition to the capital campaign fund to pay the cost of the project, in addition,
Doesn't say the YMCA's capital campaign, it just says capital
the
campaign.
cost of the project, the YMCA will conduct and support campaigns. Will conduct and support. The proceeds will be used for that. I mean, It says it in the agreement. And I've just got real concerns at this point is that if you take away the $175,000 from the amount that was raised through Union Bank for the design phase.
Well, let's go back here.
Okay.
That pledge started in 2008 when the terms were totally different. And again, I'd have to go back, but at that time,
and you know what?
Let him finish it.
Go ahead.
It was a different set of circumstances. We were talking about a different area where the Y was going to be built. The money was going to be fronted, I believe, by Newland companies, and the YMCA embarked on an operational campaign, just like we did in King George. We didn't deviate from that plan at all. So it was a different set of circumstances than what we just did 2 years ago. It was just totally different. The money was going to be fronted for the YMCA, and the YMCA embarked on an annual support campaign for operations. That money was used for the soft costs for that site, and we have the invoices to back that up. We had the plans drawn up by the architect, and we had the civil engineer generating a site plan on a different site. So everything changed as we moved forward 2-3 years later. So I just need to be clear on that.
Okay, but then I'm going to go back to paragraph 13, that everything since then that's been raised. Is there any of this that's previous to that also?
No. So everything after that's been forwarded to the county, and...
Let me ask you the hard question.
Okay.
If the building costs more than $5 million, if you get close to the end and you need another $500,000 or $600,000 to finish. Can you tell me how that will be accomplished?
Hope we don't get that. I feel like we're going to bring this within budget, and that's what so I'm just looking at that scenario. I fully anticipate that we're going to bring this project within budget. So I'd hate to move forward on a hypothetical scenario.
Well, and I guess I'm just feeling a little burned because this wasn't going to be any public money, and it is now. And if the $5 million doesn't cover the entire cost, I'm just looking for an answer. I mean, some sort of an avenue. How would you proceed then?
Well, we'll have to sit down and discuss it at that time. But again, I don't want to even go there, Mr. Seeley. We're going to bring this project within budget. That's what we anticipate. In doing the math, there's the money left over to fund the contract, and I believe we have $75,000 for a water hookup. The money's there. So,
speaking of water hookup, there's one other thing I wanted to bring up. In the bills that we received for this last set, the YMCA has been delinquent on the land disturbance permit. You guys have been out of compliance since June for $1,800.
that's been paid.
Because when I talked to folks in planning, they said it hadn't been paid. So,
I think you can talk to Mr. Nunley. That's been paid.
Mr. Nunley's still here? Okay, I will, but I'm just, because this has been rolling around.
No, I
I see there's
understand.
several emails for this, and while we're all standing here, I just thought we'd just talk about all
Sure.
the outstanding bills that there are.
Mr. Seeley, I'm gonna ask if we can let some of the other board members have a chance.
That's fine, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Underwood?
Mr. Riley, how are you?
How you doing, Ray?
I think we're having a good discussion here.
Yes, sir.
So what I'm hearing and understanding, I think I understand one of Mr. Seeley's points, but I'm going to go backwards first. The funding mechanism for this YMCA, based on what I heard you say, based on the other YMCAs, is a different funding mechanism. Is that correct?
Well, it's
How it's
changed
being
since the original YMCA was built. As time went on, it became very apparent to the board of directors that it was necessary to try to raise 100% of the bricks and mortar and to partner with a locality that felt like a YMCA would be important to their citizens. So moving forward, we've adopted a different business model that calls for us to raise 100% of the capital costs. The YMCA would then embark on an operational campaign to raise money for operational shortfalls, a burn rate, if you will, in the first 3 to 6 months, so that we'd be financially viable from the very beginning. So we did that in King George, and of course we did have some additional financing, but when we decided to move forward, we said it is imperative that we raise 100% of the capital costs for a facility.
Right. And, you know, when we talked earlier about the YMCA, you know, my concern again, as I said, I did not want one penny of taxpayer money to pay for this YMCA. So I understand the viability. We talked about the rooftops and the viability once it gets to fruition and it's open and it's operating. But certainly looking at it from capital money that's raised, it does say that that money would be paid back to the principal, and we use that for interest payments that was raised. I think that's something that is an eye-opener for me, certainly. So I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. You know, I still believe and think the YMCA can be and is a good mechanism. As I told you before, I worked, volunteered with YMCA's in North Richmond, and it was a little scrawny YMCA, and now it's one of the biggest and the best. So I do understand.
It's North Richmond Y, I think you said.
The North Richmond YMCA,
wonderful
that's
Y.
right. It is. So I do understand the growing pains that we're going through, and I do understand my colleagues' concerns about transparency. And I think that's the biggest issue, that if we're on the hook for $5 million, then we just simply say we're on the hook and we've got to continue to raise money so our taxpayers are not saddled with this burden.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where we're trying to do a balancing act here. Certainly, you know, my colleague to my left, Mr. Akers, was driving hard for a Y. He believes in the Y, and I understand. And certainly I do also. So I just wanted to say again that the transparency piece of it is the big issue, Mr. Riley.
Yeah.
In terms of how we're funding, what's the burden to our taxpayers, and what are the potential pitfalls for us. And I think that's what we need to address.
Sure. Well, let me just say that we have not embarked on an operational campaign because per the agreements, any money that's raised during this time goes to pay the county. So we haven't embarked on a campaign simultaneous to the fundraising efforts of the community. So we're holding back on that. So unlike in King George, we started prior to opening, we embarked on that that operational campaign. We haven't done that in Caroline because we're full aware that the fundraising efforts right now, which I've agreed to help with, have to go towards paying off the debt. So we haven't done that campaign. So we're not double dipping and cross-pollinating donors. Mm-hmm. We're out here trying to raise some money for the county. Okay. And I want you know, I hope all of you feel that this project is transparent. There's no hidden agenda with the Y. I mean, we're here, and the YMCA is going to be a good thing. I guarantee you that on a daily basis, the people coming utilizing that YMCA are going to enhance their quality of life. Children are going to have a place to go. Families are going to have a place to recreate together, and senior citizens are going to improve their quality of life. This is a good thing for the county. I know it's a tough time. This is the toughest economy of our lifetime since the '29 stock market crash, and it's a very tenuous time to be raising dollars. The donor pool is dried up. But I can tell you, Mr. Akers has worked very hard at trying to raise this money as I've been. We've been on many calls together, and it doesn't always work out. There's no guarantees in life. But I tell you, I think we're going to have more success when the building's up. And there's more of a favorable response. This is going to be a good thing for Caroline, and it's a tough call right now, but we're going to continue to beat the streets to raise this money.
And I don't think there's any question about whether it's good for Caroline. I don't think that's the issue, again.
No, I know.
So
it's the taxpayer dollars.
I think we're all on the same page.
I understand that.
We're good there. But again, I think we owe it to folks that they ask the question that we have the answer. And I don't think I had the answer till I scratched, and part of it's my fault. I have to take responsibility for not reading every line of the contract, as Mr. Atwater said. And I told some of the board members, probably one of the worst contracts that you can ever sign is your marriage license, because a lot of them fail. But certainly those that do succeed, they're worth their weight in gold. So certainly I understand that nothing's guaranteed. We're going to do our best to make this work.
Yes, sir.
That's my commitment to you also. I'm going to do what I can to make sure that this works, so that my commitment to the taxpayers of Caroline County is that at the end of the day, I can look each one in the eye and say, it didn't cost you any money. That's my goal. And that has to be the goal of my good partner, the YMCA. You use the word partnership. That means if the boat sinks, we sink together.
Absolutely.
So our commitment to the folks of the Caroline County is that we, again, maintain our word that we're going to do everything possible so that when the end of the day comes, not one taxpayer dime is going to be spent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Akers?
I certainly have no questions, Mr. Raleigh.
We have questions for Mr. Raleigh.
Yeah, I have no questions of Mr. Raleigh, other than to say the $5 million that the grant agreement spells out. Now, Mr. Sealer has alluded to overruns and what's going to happen at the end of the day. I'm being quite honest, that's not my problem. That's the wise problem, because $5 million was the grant agreement, and I would not believe that the Rappahannock Area YMCA would leave a building that only needs a little bit of money to finish out to make it part of the Y system. I just can't believe that would happen. But again, that's not my problem. It's not the board's problem. That's the Y's problem.
Okay, and then we'll have discussion further if we need it. But Mr. Taylor, questions for Mr. Rowland?
Yes, just a couple of, we've kind of talked about fundraising, we talked about tax dollars, and certainly I support the Y. I wasn't on the board at the time that the Y was voted on, but I always thought it was a good thing. And on that note, can you just talk just very briefly about about the benefits to the county as a result of the Y? We've talked about tax dollars and how we don't want to see any tax dollars going, but talk a little bit about the benefits to Caroline.
Well, when I was talking to Mr. Akers, and this has been a tough row to hoe, no question. And I said, Wayne, I hope this never happens. But if one child is saved, his life is saved because they learned how to swim in the YMCA in the Mattaponi or Pamunkey River or whatever, then this project will be worth it 100 times over. Now, I can't guarantee that, and I pray to God that never happens. But I can guarantee you one thing. On a daily basis, when this YMCA is up and operational, the people of Caroline are going to have an opportunity to improve their quality of life. I can't tell you how many senior citizens, and this is the first YMCA that we built that we've incorporated the therapeutic pool that's going to have an elevated water temperature. Last October, I had a hip replaced, and I can tell you what, the water is critical to the rehabilitation of those joints. And I can tell you that a growing contingent in terms of our membership at each one of the branches is the senior citizens. Their lives are going to be improved. Families are going to have meaningful recreation opportunities because of this facility. Young children are going to be able to get their first jobs at the YMCA, whether working the front desk, whether becoming lifeguards, whether they become a summer day camp counselor or a CIT counselor in training. There's going to be a plethora of an upside to having this YMCA. Mr. Akers at one time talked about the childhood obesity rate and the high teen pregnancy rate. We're going to give them the opportunity to do some quality programs, to have a safe haven to go. The YMCA is a good thing. It quickly became the focal point in King George, where the residual spin-offs of that facility, many of the outside organizations utilize the YMCA to have their meetings, to have get-togethers. It serves as a conduit, if you will, to enhance the curriculums of many of the agencies in those localities. The YMCA is a good thing. It's non-political. The playing field is level. One board member said, where can you get in the fitness room and your lawyer's on one side, your orthopedic surgeon's on the other side on the treadmill, and there could be a person right in the middle talking that's on financial assistance. You'd never know that. That's all confidential. And the playing field, the beauty of the Y is what I think the world should be like. The playing field is level. That's what the YMCA is going to bring. It's going to be a good thing. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding